Thank you. The Landon Foundation saved your life years ago.
It did.
Tell me.
Well, that's a little personal.
Come on. We're going to get really personal tonight.
The truth of it is, it was in 1993, I think, and Brooke and I had about $1,000 left to our name, and I wondered if, we could continue thinking about writing, and I went up to teach at Logan High School, or Logan, Utah High School. I was coming back down just thinking I've got to get a job and do something real with my life. And when I got home, I realized there was a name I didn't know and a phone call that I hadn't answered and that I should probably call it. And it was called the Landon Foundation. And I called, and as I remember, Patrick answered and said, "Let me put you on speakerphone." And I thought that it was a telemarketing telephone call, and I was almost to hang up. And then they announced this wonderful stipend. I'll be honest, it was $50,000, which was more money than we had ever known. And I burst into tears, hysterically sobbing on the speakerphone. And I think as much as the financial support was their support in saying, "We see you," and keep going.
Really interesting in relation to the position of the contemporary American artist nowadays. It seems to me that for quite a while we've been working from a sort of reckless inner need. We do have these satellite places that sustain us, like the Lannan Foundation and other places, but there has been a sense of or certainly a lot of artists are coming indoors, they're closing the curtains, and they're not really engaging with the world. But there's been a renewed sense of what the role of the artist might be these last few months. Do you align yourself with that, or do you think that is there? Have our nostrils been dilated somehow by the need to speak out again?
I used to think about that a lot when I was younger. Am I an artist or am I an activist? And I was really torn. Because I think in the United States, if politics enters your work, you're less pure. You're certainly less literary. And then I just stopped thinking about it, because all I knew is what I loved. And that was the intersection of language and landscape through story.
Right.
And so I don't think about it. I think about how do we have an engaged life, and how can I be of use? And I happen to write, and in many ways, my family's tool of choice is a shovel.
Right.
Just the other night, we were at a dinner table with my two brothers, my father and his partner, and Brooke and I, and my brother, after we were grousing about, that's putting it lightly, about Donald Trump and the Republicans, even my father, which is new territory, my youngest brother, Hank, wouldn't speak. And I finally said, "Hank, what are you thinking?" I know he voted for Trump. And he said, "This is so depressing. Look inward rather than outward." And we all just stopped. And he said, "It's not outside of you. It's inside of you."
Interesting.
And then he said, "But what do I know? I'm just a ditch digger." And I watched my father's heart break. I wanted to rush and say, no, it's dignified work. But what he was saying was, I love what I do, and I love being close to the earth, and I love my dogs, and I love taking care of the men that I work with, and that's enough for me. And so I guess, my brother has blisters from a shovel. I have gnarled fingers from my pencil. And I just think it's the work that we do in the world. Again, each of us in our own way.
Do you despair
with the gifts
sometimes?
that are ours.
Do you despair?
Every day.
Every day. When you finish a book, do you think that you'll never be able to? Oh, do I? Nobody's interested in what I feel tonight.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I finish a book, I feel like I can never do it again. They're all going to realize that I'm a charlatan, and then I sort of build it up again, and I have to get out, and I feel that I absolutely have to say something. But there's that exhaustion that comes with finishing a piece of work and then finding the new territory and finding the new obsession that you want to go towards. But you know what I wanted to ask you? I have this image of your dad. I'd love to meet him and hang out with him and see him. But will you tell me what he was like to you?
He doesn't sing.
He doesn't sing? Well,
Colum sings.
I know, my problem is I do sing, but I can't. The big difference. We can get you all singing right now, but did your dad sing to you? Tell me a little. Tell me about Terry Tempest Williams when she was a young girl.
This just seems so boring.
No, it's fantastic.
I want
to know what you were like with your dad.
I walked the pipelines. I walked the
did?
trenches. And as my father was gauging, whether it was sand or hard rock, or if they'd need a jackhammer or a backhoe, what the bidding would look like. How long would this take to lay pipe from, Flaming Gorge Dam into the town of Vernal? I was watching birds. I was watching red-tailed hawks. I was looking at coyotes. I was keeping track in a journal of what we were seeing. And then I would find my brothers who were building dams on the river and join them.
And what moment was there a specific moment when you thought that this language has power, this thing that I like to do, this gathering of words will somehow be the thing that I really want to do? Was there a specific moment?
I think it was more private. It was the way I kept saying in a culture where women had no voice.
Right.
And so my voice was between pages locked with a key that I hid under my pillow so no one else would read them.
Tell everybody about the journals, your mum's journals. I'm sure a lot of people here know about, I've read When Women Were Birds, but tell them about what happened, what the gift that your mum gave to you.
Well, I think the one thing that Mormon women are expected to do is keep a journal and bear children.
Right.
And before my mother was a very private woman. And I will never forget lying in bed with her a week before she died. And I was rubbing her back. It was a wicked storm outside. And my mother was facing the window and she said, "Terry, I'm leaving you all my journals, but you have to promise me you won't look at them until after I'm gone." I didn't know my mother kept journals. And I gave her my word. And then she told me exactly where they were. And then we began talking about other things. A week later, she died. A month later, I thought, now I can find out what my mother was really thinking. And I went up to the house. There was no one there. My father and brothers were down south laying pipe. And my mother's journals were exactly where she said they would be. 3 shelves worth, beautifully bound, some in cloth, some in leather, some in denim. And I pulled out the first journal. It was empty. I pulled out the second journal, it was empty. The third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, shelf after shelf after shelf, all my mother's journals were blank. It was a second death, and I could not handle what that could have meant or why she would do that. And I just unceremoniously gathered them up, took them outside, put them in the back of my Subaru, drove back up the canyon, put them on the shelf, and for 25 years wrote in them.
See? She gave you that silence and made a gift of it and actually sort of did a sort of John Cage moment. You know John Cage with the 433? He gets up and he tells the musicians to remain tacit. And that's what they do, they remain tacit. But in that tacitness, in that silence, there is so many loud things that were going on. Your mum was telling you, what? That she loved you?
I still don't know. I can't tell if it was right because I couldn't, or if there was a longing or a yearning that wasn't fulfilled because, she was diagnosed with breast cancer at 38. Right. She had 4 children, a demanding husband, a church that had certain expectations, that she was so busy living her life that would be an indulgence to write about it. Or if it was an act of defiance.
Yes.
And I still don't know. But
that's good, though.
But 25 years later, I was 54. when I finally could bring that up to consciousness. It was the age she was when she died. And I think as women, particularly on this International Women's Day, we are continually trying to find our voice, to fight for our voice.
You made a call for women to have equal status and to engage with the priesthood in the Mormon church. Got you a lot of flack, right? Well, I told you, we're
You know, a woman like Kate Kelly took on the Brethren, and she was excommunicated.
Right.
I have been much more, you know, I think I've been quieter.
You have?
I do. I haven't been excommunicated. I'm now too old, and it would be silly to
Would you like to be a priest?
excommunicate a bird watcher. No, actually.
No.
I value
What would you like to be if you weren't?
my voice in the church, because it's a pain in their ass.
That's good. We need that thorn, and we need that moment when the thorn enters the skin as well, because that's what you're doing, actually. It's not just that you declare yourself as a thorn. Anybody can do that. But you have to actually penetrate the skin and get through to the pulse of the wound. And that's what you're talking about when you're talking also about action. We talk about words and action. And that Edward Abbey quote tonight, what was it?
Sentiment without action is the ruin of the soul.
Yeah. What are your forms of action, apart from, say, obviously the oil and gas leases were a form of action. In fact, if you get them back, I'd love to go and drill in the ground with you, and we'll drill for stories.
Yeah. Wouldn't that
Or,
be great?
yeah. Or we'll get everybody to come along and plant their story in the ground. Because that's really what it's all about, right?
I mean, that's what we were so excited about, is all these creative forms of energy, right, that could happen. We can still do that.
You can? I mean, do you still have the land?
We do. It's public lands.
Right.
And as long as we're in appeal.
Or you still have the lease to the land, right?
You know, we don't have the leases, but that's the thing that we figured out. You don't need the leases, in a sense. If we can tie up the courts, I don't know.
And will you do that?
We're doing it now.
Yeah.
But with low expectations with the administration that we now have.
My son reads your work. My daughter reads your work. She considers you one of her great heroes. She's in Bowdoin College on the East Coast.
She is so fierce. She's going to run for senator.
She is going to run for senator someday.
We're trying to think about Maine. Maine would be easier than New York.
Right. But are you optimistic for this generation that's coming along?
I don't think about optimism, and I don't think about hope. I think about inspiration, and I'm deeply inspired by this generation. I mean, Isabella, I think they're pragmatic visionaries. I see it with Isabella, I see it with John Michael, I see it with Nathan, he's older. But I love working with these young people. And I think they keep us young. And, you know, last week, as you know, with Lisa, a friend of ours who works with Narrative 4, a group that we care deeply about, Story Exchange, as a vehicle for peace, we met with these emerging leaders from marginalized communities. I have never been so humbled. It is about learning a different vocabulary. It is about humbling ourselves, not to speak, but to listen. Right. And that's where I want to be.
This is the radical thing about Narrative 4 that we've sort of co-founded together. That we talk about radical empathy and fearless hope through radical empathy, but we get people together from various parts of the world, and they step into one another's shoes, and they tell each other stories, and then they tell those stories back to one another. So that if myself and Terry were in a room, she would tell me a story about something that deeply mattered to her, like the bison story, and I would tell her my story, and then I would get up and say, "Hi, my name is Terry Tempest Williams." And it is a moment of profound transformation, because we're taking stories and we're making them valuable once again, and we're learning how to listen.
And the responsibility of holding one story, another story. Can I get it right? Can I tell it right? But then what's so interesting is you realize the language is secondary to the emotional landscape.
Right.
And we hear each other differently.
Exactly.
And I think that's what we're so hungry for.
Well, it strikes me that one of the big political failures that we're in right now is the failure of empathy. And also the failure...
Or to imagine another person's point of view. I am failing at that.
Right.
Because I'm so busy being on my personal rant that, as my brother said, look inside. So I think it's a time of deep disturbance, and I think it's also a time of awakening.
Do you ever get called sentimental?
Yeah, all the time.
How do you react to it? Yes, I do. I get called sentimental. I love it, actually. Because, well, first of all, I don't feel I'm sentimental. I don't feel you're sentimental. I feel you're full of sentiment, which is an entirely different thing. And I love going toe-to-toe with any cynic. Jim Harrison used to say, I'd rather be the man who wears my heart on my sleeve than be the squinty-eyed bastard sitting in the corner of the, the cynic. And that's what I feel. But I actually feel that the cynics are the sentimental ones, because they live in the cloud of their limited understanding. They're unprepared to journey outside of themselves.
And I always feel that if a writer becomes sentimental, it's because they're not telling the truth.
Exactly.
And I think, because if you're telling the truth, it's always a surprise.
Right. But then you're putting yourself on the edge. We talked earlier today about Kurt Vonnegut, who said we should be continually jumping off of cliffs and developing our wings on the way down.
I love that. And I just, one of the students last week, or the leaders, Michael, was carrying this quote that he said he's going to create a tattoo on his arm, possibly. And it's from Camus, and it's, we should be on the verge of tears every single day. I love that.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Bear's Ears, are you heartbroken? Are you going to fight?
We're fighting now. The elders are praying. They are in ceremony. I trust that. Jim and Note, if you're here, thank you for your leadership and for holding that space. It looks as though Chaffetz has made a deal with Trump. He's, as you know, chair of oversight. What we have heard is that when he went into Trump's office, what the president said is no oversight or don't come in any further.
Wow.
What does Bear's Ears mean to Donald Trump? Not
Nothing.
much. But again, this is what...
He might care about the bear's arse, but maybe not the bear's ears. Anyway, did I say that? No, I didn't say that.
But here's the thing, and I think it's what Senator Tom Udall was saying. We have a voice.
Right.
These voices are being heard. They're being inundated with calls. The tribes are speaking. Zinke, our new Secretary of the Interior, is coming to Utah in the next week or two to meet with the tribes. I have faith that something will be transmitted beyond language, and that's dignity and strength. And when Mark Maryboy, at the celebration in Monument Valley on January 7th, when various members of the tribes gathered, said that he remembers being a child sitting at his grandfather and grandmother's knees when Bobby Kennedy came to Monument Valley in 1968 when he was running for president. And he met with the elders and said, "How can I serve you?" Can you imagine?
Wow. Fantastic.
And the elders said, "Protect Bear's Ears. This is the place of our prayers. Not just to protect it for us, but for you."
Right.
So when the Utah delegation says this is a midnight monument, what the Maryboys were saying is hardly.
So you go about, and one of my favorite works of yours is your job is, as I said in the introduction, is to find beauty in the broken places. Does it not scare you how broken we seem to be becoming more and more and more, and how can you continue to find beauty if all the places continue to be fracked and fractured and broken?
So I brought you a gift. I'm sorry, it's not wrapped well.
What is this?
It's an answer to your question, or it's a thought to your question.
What is this? It's beautiful. What is it? Tell me. Does anybody know?
Figure it out. The Irishman, right?
Okay, it's native.
No.
Native craft.
Well, it's a craft, but put it up to your eye.
Oh, this
Other
way?
direction. You've been in New York.
Oh
too
my
long.
word! It's a kaleidoscope. It's so beautiful. Ah, kaleidoscopic.
So how would you answer that question with that tool in hand? As
Yes.
a writer of metaphor and story.
I would quote John Berger again, who says that never again will a single story be told as if it were the only one. And that our function is to go out and tell as many stories as we possibly can, particularly from the most anonymous corners that we can find, and to tell them absolutely kaleidoscopically, from as many angles to give a proper truth. All this idea of truth these days, truth seems very unidirectional. And people say, I have the truth. But the fact of the matter is that you have to hold different truths in the palms of your hands and hold them and weigh them up all at once. Does that work? Yeah? I want to get you to read. I'm conscious that we have some time. I want to get you to read from The Open Space of Democracy. But first, can we spend just a minute or two telling everybody about what Narrative 4 is and what we hope to do in the world with it?
I just think it's the most exciting thing I'm a part of, because I believe we're storied beings. And it's the one thing, when someone tells a story, it bypasses rhetoric and pierces the heart. We feel it, we're there. It becomes the conscience of the community. Right. We become accountable for that knowledge which has been shared. And I think especially now where we all have opinions, we've forgotten how to listen. When someone tells a story, and I know in my own tradition as Mormon, when my great-grandmothers or grandparents would tell a story, everyone would lean forward, the room would quiet, and the children would fall asleep. It's a way that we're transported, I think, to our highest and deepest selves and touch our humanity again, in place.
Our friend Toby Wolfe, the night that we got together in Colorado with a whole group of artists, and we really founded Narrative 4 together, he said, storytelling is an escape from the jail of self. And that particular night was pretty incredible. We had Reza Aslan, Greg Khalil, Lisa Consiglio, all these people who were there. And we were up in a cabin, we were sharing stories with one another, and there was no Kleenex there. And I'll never forget, somebody went to the bathroom and got the toilet roll.
And we were throwing it to each other.
Because we were in tears telling these stories. And these were tough. Imagine Toby Wolfe like crying his eyes out. He's a tough dude. And it just shows me that it goes to the heart of what I do believe is the essential democracy, and that is the democracy of storytelling. That goes across, thank you, that it goes across borders, it goes across boundaries. It does not matter who you are, where you come from, how rich, how poor. You know, I don't privilege the poor. I don't privilege the wealthy. I don't privilege the Irish. No, I do actually. But you know, we need to tell stories to one another. You are, as far as I'm concerned, one of our absolute master storytellers, and I'm so grateful for everything that you do. I know that we could talk for hours and hours and hours. We have 1 minute left, and I want you to please read from The Open Space of Democracy and tell me a little bit about the book too.
I'll read a paragraph from The Open Space
and can
of
I
Democracy.
watch you through the Kaleidoscope?
If you will just sing us a ballad, and then we can go. Because
are you serious?
You know, one of the things that I was so excited about when Barbara said, who would you want to be in conversation with? I just thought we can bring Colum back to the West. You know, he rode his bike through here and he stayed east. We need to bring you back. And so would you sing us a story, and then I'll close with a paragraph.
I have so many songs, but I think it's probably better to get a song that everybody can sing. In Dublin, no, not. I can do a story then. Well, there's a great song, but I told you I can't sing.
Yes, you can. Do In Dublin.
And Dublin's okay.
We were in Limerick together, and I mean, I do not drink very much, but when you're with Colum, the more you drink, the more he'll start singing and telling stories.
Right. Everybody knows this one. In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first set me eyes on sweet Molly Malone, as she wheeled her wheelbarrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. That's beautiful. And mussels, alive, alive, oh. She was a fishmonger, and sure 'twas no wonder, for so were her father and mother before. And they both wheeled their barrows through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. Alive, alive, oh. Alive, alive, oh. Crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. There are other verses. I also have a naughty gay version. We'll save that for later on. Thank you. You sounded absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much for being here, and let us hold Steffi in our hearts and
Yes.
follow up with her care. And let's go home with stories. And the person that you're with, maybe before you leave, tell a simple story to each other. The human heart is the first home of democracy. It is where we embrace our questions. Can we be equitable? Can we be generous? Can we listen with our whole beings, not just our minds, and offer our attention rather than our opinions? And do we have enough resolve in our hearts to act courageously, relentlessly, without giving up, ever, trusting our fellow citizens to join with us in our determined pursuit of a living democracy? The heart is the house of empathy, whose door opens when we receive the pain of others. This is where bravery lives, where we find our mettle to give and receive, to love and be loved, to stand in the center of uncertainty with strength, not fear, understanding this is all there is. The heart is the path to wisdom because it dares to be vulnerable in the presence of power. Our power lies in our love of our homelands. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Woo. Thank you.
That was amazing.